The phone rang just as Jake Mitchell was about to bite into his Vegemite toast. In the tiny studio apartment above Wong's Noodle House in Surrey Hills, the shrill sound seemed twice as loud as it should. Jake glanced at the cracked screen of his phone and frowned. The number wasn't one he recognized, but in his line of work as a freelance carpenter, unknown numbers usually meant potential jobs. "Jake Mitchell speaking," he answered, balancing the phone between his shoulder and ear while reaching for his coffee. "Mr. Mitchell, this is Jeffrey Whitmore, from Whitmore, Harrison and Associates, solicitors. I'm calling regarding the estate of your great-uncle, Arthur Mitchell." Jake nearly dropped his toast. "I'm sorry, mate. I think you've got the wrong bloke. I don't have a great-uncle Arthur. I assure you, Mr. Mitchell, our records are quite thorough. Arthur Mitchell was your grandfather's brother. He passed away 3 weeks ago in his home, the Blue Mountains." Jake sat down heavily on his second-hand couch. His grandfather had died when Jake was 12, and he'd never heard mention of any siblings. His own father had died in a car accident when Jake was 8, and his mum had passed from cancer 5 years ago. As far as Jake knew, he was alone in the world. "Look, Mr. Whitmore, I think there's been some mistake. My family never mentioned any Arthur Mitchell. That's not entirely surprising, given the circumstances. Mr. Mitchell, would it be possible for you to come to our offices today? There are some matters regarding your inheritance that require immediate attention." Inheritance. Jake's voice cracked slightly. At 28, he was barely scraping by, taking odd carpentry jobs and living paycheck to paycheck. The idea of inheriting anything seemed surreal. "Yes, Mr. Mitchell. A rather substantial inheritance, I'm afraid. However, there are certain conditions attached that make time quite critical. How soon could you be here?" Jake looked around his shabby apartment, at the stack of overdue bills on his kitchen counter, at the hole in his work boots that he'd been meaning to fix with duct tape. "I can be there in an hour. Where are you located?" "Excellent. We're in the MLC Center on Martin Place. Level 34. Ask for me specifically, Jeffrey Whitmore." "And Mr. Mitchell?" "Yeah. I must stress the importance of discretion. Please don't discuss this call with anyone. Your great-uncle was quite specific about that." The line went dead, leaving Jake staring at his phone in bewilderment. He sat down his breakfast, no longer hungry, and headed for the shower. His mind raced as the hot water, what little there was before it turned cold, ran over him. A great-uncle he'd never heard of. An inheritance. Conditions. Discretion. An hour later, Jake stood in the gleaming lobby of the MLC Center, feeling distinctly out of place in his only clean pair of jeans and a button-down shirt that had seen better days. The building reeked of money and success, two things that had always seemed just out of his reach. The elevator ride to the 34th floor felt like ascending into another world. When the doors opened, Jake was greeted by a receptionist who looked like she'd stepped out of a fashion magazine. "Jake Mitchell to see Jeffrey Whitmore," he said, suddenly very aware of his calloused hands and work-worn appearance. "Of course, Mr. Mitchell. He's expecting you." Jeffrey Whitmore turned out to be a thin, elderly man, with silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses. His office was all dark wood and leather, with a view of Sydney Harbor that probably cost more than Jake made in a year. "Please sit down, Mr. Mitchell. Can I offer you something to drink? Coffee? Water?" "Coffee would be great, thanks." Jake settled into a leather chair that was more comfortable than his own bed. Whitmore pressed a button on his desk. "Helen, could you bring us some coffee, please?" He turned back to Jake, studying him with sharp gray eyes. "You have your father's look about you, Thomas, wasn't it?" Jake straightened. "You knew my dad?" "Not personally, but Arthur showed me photographs over the years. He followed your life from a distance, you know. Your father's death, your mother's illness, your struggles to make ends meet. He was quite proud when you started your carpentry business, even if it has been challenging." "How could he know all that? And why didn't he ever contact me?" Whitmore sighed and opened a thick file on his desk. "That's a complicated story, Mr. Mitchell. Your great-uncle Arthur was, shall we say, a man with a colorful past. He had reasons for keeping his distance from family, but he never forgot about you." The lawyer pulled out a sealed envelope and placed it on the desk between them. Jake could see his name written across it in shaky handwriting. "Arthur has left you his entire estate," Whitmore continued. his house in the Blue Mountains, various investments, and a rather substantial sum of money. Jake's heart began to pound. How substantial? $50 million. The words hit Jake like a physical blow. He gripped the arms of his chair, certain he'd misheard. I'm sorry, how much? $50 million, Mr. Mitchell. However, before you get too excited, there are conditions. 8 of them, to be precise. All must be completed within 30 days of Arthur's death, which gives you exactly 9 days remaining. Jake's mouth had gone completely dry. What kind of conditions? That's where things become interesting. Your great-uncle was a very cautious man, perhaps even paranoid. The conditions are detailed in this envelope, but they must be completed in order, and you cannot share them with anyone outside of this office. Each condition will lead you to the next, like a treasure hunt of sorts. Whitmore leaned forward, his expression growing serious. I must warn you, Mr. Mitchell. 2 other potential heirs have attempted to complete these conditions over the years. Neither succeeded. What happened to them? They died. The coffee arrived, but Jake's hands were shaking too much to lift the cup. They died. How? Different circumstances each time. Arthur always maintained it was coincidence, but... Whitmore shrugged. Let's just say that your great-uncle had enemies, people who had reasons to want his secrets to stay buried. Jake stared at the envelope on the desk. $50 million. More money than he could spend in 10 lifetimes. But at what cost? What if I don't want to do it? What if I just walk away? Then the money goes to charity, and you go back to your life as it was. But Mr. Mitchell, I feel I should tell you something else. Your great-uncle believed that certain people might come looking for you regardless, now that he's dead. He thought you might be safer if you played the game rather than ignored it. Safer? What the hell was my great-uncle involved in? That, I'm afraid, is something you'll have to discover for yourself. The conditions will reveal everything, if you're brave enough to follow them through. Jake reached for the envelope with trembling fingers. The paper felt heavy, expensive. On the back was a wax seal bearing the impression of a rose. Before you open that, Whitmore said quietly, I need to ask you one final time. Are you absolutely certain you want to do this? Once you read those conditions, there's no going back. People will know you're in the game, and they'll be watching. Jake thought about his overdue rent, his empty refrigerator, his uncertain future. Then he thought about his parents, both gone too young, and the family history that had apparently been hidden from him his entire life. What would you do? He asked Whitmore. The old lawyer smiled sadly. I'd probably do exactly what you're about to do. Open the envelope, Mr. Mitchell, and God help you. Jake broke the seal and unfolded the letter inside. His great-uncle's handwriting was shaky but legible. My dear Jake, if you're reading this, then I'm dead, and you're about to embark on the most dangerous journey of your life. I'm sorry for that, but I'm also sorry for leaving you to face the world alone, with nothing but the pittance I've watched you struggle with. The money is real, and it's yours if you can survive to claim it. But more importantly, the truth is finally within reach. The truth about why your father really died. The truth about why your family lived in shadows and poverty, while others grew rich on blood money. I've spent 40 years running from my past, Jake. Now it's time to face it. But I'm too old and too sick to see justice done. That burden falls to you now. Complete the 8 conditions, and you'll have more than money. You'll have the power to make things right. The first condition is simple. Find where the truth was buried with the roses. Start at my house. The address is 47 Cliff Road, Lura. The key is taped under the mailbox. Trust no one completely, but trust your instincts absolutely. And remember, some secrets are worth dying for, but even more are worth living for. Your great-uncle, Arthur Mitchell. P.S. Watch your back. They'll know you're coming before you know they're there. Jake looked up at Whitmore, who was watching him with a mixture of sympathy and apprehension. What have I gotten myself into? Jake whispered. I wish I could tell you, Whitmore replied. But I suspect you're about to find out. Will you do it? Jake folded the letter and stood up. Outside the window, Sydney sparkled in the afternoon sun, oblivious to the storm that was about to break over one struggling carpenter's life. Yeah, he said, surprised by the steadiness in his own voice. I'll do it. Then Godspeed, Jake Mitchell. And remember, if you need legal assistance, call me immediately. Day or night. As Jake walked toward the elevator, he could feel Whitmore watching him. The letter felt like it was burning in his pocket, and he couldn't shake the feeling that someone else was watching him too. The elevator doors closed, and Jake saw his reflection in the polished metal. In 9 days, he'd either be $50 million richer, or he'd be dead. The game had begun.